Deham Shri Guru Shri Yutapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradhayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaura Tushe Namaha Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So Hare Krishna, everyone. It's just really nice to see all of you. I understand that you've completed chapter 2 and you're going on to chapter 3. Is that correct?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay. So chapter 3 is entitled Karma Yoga. Now, I understand that Toshin Krishna Prabhu has briefly covered certain terminology in chapter 2. Covering, for example, what Nishkama Karma Yoga is, or how it leads on to Gyana Yoga as part of the overall yoga ladder. What we want to do is to firm up those concepts that were discussed in the second chapter as we lead on to the study of the third chapter, because these concepts are foundational to appreciating and understanding not only the third chapter, but the core structure and foundation of Vedic civilization. Chapter 3 actually is the chapter that describes the foundation and the general mode of operation for everybody in Vedic culture. So in chapter 2, Arjuna, of course, in verse number 7, has taken shelter of the Lord. He reflects a person who has tried to find a material solution, but being unable to do so, his inherent piety has enabled him to find or to seek answers in a place where he can get spiritual knowledge, and that's under the Lord. The Lord has then spoken the beginning of spiritual knowledge. He has clarified for him that he is a spirit soul, and that is from verses 12 through to roughly about 30. Then in verse 238 is a pivotal turning point of the second chapter. Can everybody turn to verse 38 of the second chapter? My apologies, 39. So 239, it's page 105 in my copy of the text. So when all of you studied this verse, I would imagine that you had discussed it at some length. Can someone share what they understand of 239 and why they see it as, or why it is considered to be an important verse in the second chapter? Somebody can share that, that would be helpful. Anybody?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Sorry, was that Nandan?
Srinivasa Prabhu, you can go.
Oh, Srinivasa Prabhu. Please carry on, Prabhuji.
You continue, Prabhuji. You continue.
Prabhu, this verse essentially up until this point, Krishna has been explaining the reasons why Arjuna should fight from the Sankhya Yoga perspective, which is the analytical study of understanding that one is a soul, and also continuing on from that, the fact that Arjuna is in the position of a Kshatriya and he must perform that position, and if he weren't performing that position as a Kshatriya, then they would just think he's running away from battle, and all his idea of, like, I'm actually being kind will not be thought of. They'll just think he's a coward.
Yeah.
And it's from this point that Krishna, there's an inflection point, because Krishna starts explaining the idea of Buddhi Yoga, or Prabhupada translates it as Krishna consciousness. But there's also the argument between Vishwanath Chakravarti and Bharadev Vijayabhushan about the fact that Buddhi Yoga could also just be the idea of using intelligence in understanding one's position, and then applying that particular result. But in that respect, it's no longer the enumeration or understanding of some kind of subject matter. It's more about understanding one's position with God and applying that.
Your answer is actually really good. There are certain things I'd like to maybe add to that particular answer. You mentioned that up to now, Krishna has spoken about fighting on the platform of the spirit soul. In the previous verses, when he was speaking about the spirit soul, which verses suggest that Arjuna should be fighting on the platform of the spirit soul? There are certainly verses that distinguish body and soul, but which verses say that Arjuna should be fighting on the platform of the spirit soul? Bear in mind the verses that speak about that induce Arjuna to fight on the basis of not going to hell, of going to the heavenly planets, of not suffering infamy, and of becoming famous in this world. That's not on the platform of the spirit soul. That's an inducement to fight, and we will come to that just briefly in a second. Because up to 239 in the second chapter, Arjuna has expressed that he sees no happiness, regardless of which path he takes in this world. And he's gone to Krishna, and Krishna said, you just need to fight. Why do you need to come to me as a spiritual master? You just need to fight. You'll either gain sovereignty in this world, or you'll go to the heavenly planets. That was in 210. But then when Arjuna expresses that there's nothing in either in the heavenly planets or in the lower planet, in this planet or in higher planetary systems that can actually make me happy, at that point, Krishna begins to instruct him in knowledge of the spirit soul. But in those verses, he has not yet spoken about fighting yet. He has helped him understand a foundation, the foundational knowledge that will give him perspective. And his instructions on fighting are still to come as of 239 on the platform of the spirit soul. So the sequence of verses that you see are, Krishna is telling him, Arjuna, you are not the body, you are the spirit soul. You should understand this distinction. You should understand that neither will you kill Bhishma, neither will they be able to kill you. And even if you do fight, you should understand that you are not personally implicated in the results of in the fighting. That's what he has said so far. He's not given him any direction to fight just yet. Then there are a sequence of verses from 231 to 238, where Krishna says you should fight, because you will avoid infamy, you'll go to Swarga. And the way to understand those verses is this. Imagine somebody's about to join the Brahmachari ashram, and they're kind of sitting on the fence. Should I join? Should I not join? Should I take spiritual life seriously? And then somebody comes up to you and says, look, in the temple, you're going to get 3 hot meals, even if you don't cook. And you get to stay in North Sydney, which is a great place to stay. And you'll have a lot of people you can be friends with. You can do a lot of, people will look up to you. People will give you respect. And all of that is true. But are there reasons to join the ashram? And when you are in the ashram, are there reasons to continue to stay there? They're not. But it's like when somebody's on the fence, you want to get them to commit in some way to performing their services. And so there are inducements to push somebody over that line, so to speak. So Arjuna was wondering, should I fight, should I not fight? Krishna told him, stop thinking that you're going to kill people, incur sin, because you're the spirit soul. Now, you should also understand that I want you to, you should be fighting, but he has not yet combined those instructions together. He's telling him, if you're on the fence about fighting or not fighting, you should understand that you should perform your duty. But now he's going to tell him why performing his duty will help him understand that he's a spirit soul. And that's the key point of 239. And that point you did bring out, Nandan Prabhu. So that this verse says, Eshate bihita sankhe. What I have told you in the form of Sankhya Yoga, Buddhir Yogatva Imam Shrunu. I'm now going to explain to you as Buddhi Yoga. Now, Nandan Prabhu, you've correctly pointed out that Buddhi Yoga has two meanings. Buddhi Yoga can mean Bhakti Yoga, as Srila Prabhupada translates it. And Buddhi Yoga can also mean Nishkama Karma Yoga. Now, the translation as Bhakti Yoga or devotional service is something that we will examine in a later chapter. However, when we understand Buddhi Yoga to be Nishkama Karma Yoga, it's important to understand why Nishkama Karma Yoga is called Buddhi Yoga. To understand this point, can you please turn to this verse, Ya Nisha Sarva Bhutana, which is 269 in chapter 2. So let me know when you've come to this verse. It's page 133 in my copy of the book. Great. So this verse says that for the person who is at the time of awakening, for most people, is a time of night for the self-control sage. The time of awakening for the sage in reverse is a time of sleeping for most other people. So this verse is somewhat cryptic in its understanding. But as I'm sure you've discussed, what this refers to is the direction in which the intelligence is moving. Because just imagine this, imagine a circle and imagine an arrow pointing out of the circle, imagine an arrow pointing within the circle. See, normally when we wake up in the morning, our intelligence goes towards, I'd like to eat this for breakfast. I need to go here for work. I need to get this done. Our intelligence is going outwards and thinking about what we need to do, what we need to have, what we need to get, what we need to take care of. That's the intelligence going outwards. It's thinking about what we have to do in connection with this world. But the intelligence going inwards, you wake up because you want to purify your heart. You wake up because you want to chant your rounds. You wake up because you want to go to class. Or even if you wake up, you're going to work because it's a part of growing in Krishna consciousness. It gives you that stable environment to grow in devotional service. There, the motivation, the intelligence is going inwards rather than outwards. And what this verse 269 says is that under normal conditions, like for most people, when they go, for example, to a ground to play a sport, or they go to work, or they go to a bar, most people, there they become very active and alive. But for sages, that kind of external activity is not so meaningful. And so they kind of tune off there. Their intelligence is not really, their mind is not really there. On the other hand, when such transcendentalists, they come to the temple, they become completely enlivened and active, and their mind begins to think about, how can I serve the Lord? How can I serve the Vaishnavas? How can I purify my heart? How can I grow in devotional service? Whereas most outside people, when they come to temple, and I don't know if you've had this experience, but they feel like really dull. They will just sit in class like this, and their mind will be somewhere else. They'll be thinking about what they would prefer to do instead. Their mind is shut off. So they're sleeping while transcendentalists are awake. And transcendentalists, their mind is shut off when materialists, they're outside and they want to do things in external activities. The difference is one intelligence is going inwards, one intelligence is going outwards. The reason Nishkama Karma Yoga, and we will describe this in more detail as we go to the 3rd chapter, but the reason this form of dealing with the material world is considered to be Buddhi Yoga is because in Nishkama Karma Yoga, no matter what you're doing, you could be going to work, you could be eating your breakfast, you could be, with your family, you could be playing cricket if that's your profession. But no matter what you're doing, your intelligence is fixed on purification of your heart. It's drawn inwards. Because the intelligence is drawn inwards while you're engaging in external activities, because your intelligence is drawn towards purification of heart no matter what you are doing, it is called Buddhi Yoga. It is called the yoga of the intelligence. So what you're thinking, and to understand, what this is like, can you turn to chapter 5? There's a famous sequence of verses. It comes in chapter 3. It also comes in chapter 5. So you'll see this in chapter 5, texts 8 and 9. The translation reads, "A person in divine consciousness, although engaged in seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, moving about, sleeping, and breathing, always knows within himself that he actually does nothing at all." So this fellow is fixed in the understanding. This transcendentalist is fixed in the understanding that I am a spirit soul. I've got nothing to do with my body. All these activities are my senses engaging with sense objects for inner purification. He thinks that I, as a soul, I'm not the doer. I am merely an instrument, and whatever I am being facilitated to do by the Lord's mercy, I am going to offer back to the Lord. I am merely an instrument. I'm not the doer here. Because while speaking, evacuating, receiving, or opening or closing his eyes, he always knows that only the material senses are engaged with their objects, and that he, as a spirit soul, is aloof from them. This is where the intelligence of the transcendentalist is directed. And because his intelligence is fixed in these two verses, his practice is called Buddhi Yoga. There's a similar sequence of verses in chapter 3. So this is verses it might be in another chapter, but there is a similar verse. Wait, I think I lost it. Okay, scratch that last part. But anyway, chapter 5, verses 8 and 9, or 7 and 8. Those two verses describe where the intelligence, 8 and 9, that describes where the intelligence of the transcendental practitioner is fixed. And because his intelligence is fixed there, no matter what he does, he actually does nothing at all. And the translation to text number 10 describes this. One who performs his duty without attachment, without thinking that I am the one who is owning this activity, or I am the reason this activity is successful. If a person acts without this mentality, he surrenders the results unto the Supreme Lord. That person is unaffected by sinful action, as the lotus leaf is untouched by water. So, Krishna has spoken this instruction to Arjuna. He has told him, see, there's a vast difference between the transcendentalist and the materialist. The materialist does things thinking that, I am the reason this activity is successful. I'm the reason this activity is a failure. And they're affected whether the activity, produces a good or bad outcome. But Krishna is telling him a transcendentalist is more worried about the internal outcome of his activity. Whether externally he makes a lot of money or doesn't make much money, whether he is successful as an athlete or he's a failure, what matters more to him is the internal purification, the qualities he's developing internally, and especially whether he's able to perform those activities, identifying as an instrument of the Lord, and whether he's able to offer that in that mood as service to the Lord. That is the key instruction that Krishna wants to give him when he's speaking 239. Now, the question one has to ask is, what is Arjuna's conception when Krishna is speaking these verses? Because Krishna has been very clear. He's made this distinction between material, a materialistic person, and a transcendentalist. Now, what Arjuna is thinking is this: you want me to be transcendental, and I get that I can, do activities and have my intelligence within. But if my intelligence has to be within, why do I need to bother engaging in activities outside? It's a natural question, right? Like when every one of us have thought of being spiritual in nature, how many of us have thought, why am I studying? Then why am I working? Why do I need to get married? How many of you have had these thoughts? Yes. So it's a very natural question. The moment you think about spiritual life, the natural consequence of thinking of spiritual life is to wonder, well, why do I need to keep doing, what's my motivation anymore? I was previously working to make a lot of money. I was previously working to, marry somebody whom I really like. Now that thing, I am told that it doesn't matter anymore. So why bother? Like, why do I need to put in that much effort? And Arjuna's thinking, particularly, you want me not just to put in effort, you want me to go and kill people. So, oh, Krishna, why do you want me to engage in such ghastly work? And if we go to 3:1, this is exactly what Arjuna says. Let's read the Sanskrit word first. Arjuna uvacha jayasi chet karmanaste mata buddhir janardhana tat kim karmani ghore mam niyojayasi keshava. Someone like to read the translation?
I will read, Prabhuji.
Please.
Yeah. Arjuna said, O Janardhana, O Keshava, why do you want to engage me in this ghastly warfare if you think that intelligence is better than fruity work?
So,
thank you, Prabhuji.
No, thank you, Mataji. So the key phrase here is mata buddhir. If you think that, the intelligence turned within is better, then I get that you can engage in activities like going outside, but why do you want me to engage in such ghastly activities? There's an implicit assumption that Arjuna is making right here. The assumption that Arjuna is making is that activities by nature are kind of dirty. They're kind of they're not spiritual in nature, because it's like, if I have to go and I have to fight people, if I have to hurt them, that can't be spiritual. Spiritual means that you have to, see everybody as a spirit soul. You have to be kind to people. And this is a fundamental misconception that most people have. Arjuna is thinking that somehow or the other, being internally spiritual is, or, engaging in like, meditation or study or that kind of internal work is more somehow or the other spiritual than being outside and engaging in one's duties. Now, this does not refer to hearing and chanting by the Lord. That's always superior. But what Arjuna is speaking of is that internal work, which is studying the scriptures, which emphasize that you're a spirit soul, meditating on the fact that you're a spirit soul. And Arjuna is thinking that that's somehow superior in its practice to going outside and fighting. Now, many of us will actually face this in a slightly different context. We will think that, it's better that I stay at home and then just kind of read books, rather than maybe going outside and facing and having, difficult conversations at work. In, doing work which, I'm going to have a lot of stress outside. Why do I need to go outside and do it? In a marriage, often those devotees who have entered marriage from brahmacharya ashram, they will tend to feel like, spending time with, wife and children, that feels like, it doesn't feel like it's spiritual in nature. We should be more connected to the temple. We should be more engaged in devotional service. They somehow think of that part as being a little bit dirty. How many of you have encountered this conception? either in oneself or in others. And here's the thing. There was, I remember having a conversation with a Mataji in the temple, and she was a very sincere devotee. And she told me, when she was initially pregnant, she had a child. Her question was, how attached should I be to the child? Because it's a material relationship. Should I not be more attached to Krishna? Should I not get the child attached to Krishna? Why should I have attachment for the child? These kinds of questions are phrased by Arjuna in using the word gore mam. He's considering, fighting, hurting people, blood to be ghastly. That's one type of ghastly. Another type of ghastly is, I've got a child and I've got to, play blocks with them or Legos with them. I've got to, show them videos and I've got to sing nursery rhymes with them. This is a waste of my time. I could be doing something else more productive instead. People consider this to be material or separate from spiritual life. And it's that conception, that misconception that Arjuna is speaking of here. Krishna just engage me in internal activities. Now, the question arises as to why Krishna is giving such an instruction. And this instruction for why Arjuna should engage in prescribed activities is the topic of the 3rd chapter of the Gita. Therefore, it is called Karma Yoga. The term Karma Yoga, the deepest understanding of this phrase is to understand that when I engage my senses in material activities, when I engage in activities of this world in such a way that it becomes fit for offering to Krishna, that type of offering is called Karma Yoga. Some people say, I'm a Karma Yogi. Fine, but that means that they're still connected to Krishna. It means that they are doing their activities and offering it to Krishna. How is it different from Bhakti Yoga? Here's the difference. If somebody, for example, is, I don't know, suppose they are golfing on the side and their main work is to kind of be a lawyer. Would you call them a lawyer or would you call them a professional golfer? Lawyer? Everybody else agree?
Yeah.
Because the law part of their life is more prominent. But suppose they dabble a little bit in law and a lot of their life is in golfing, you'd probably call them a golfer, right? So with karma yogis, the focus of their life is their prescribed duties. And the offering to the Lord comes at the end. So because of the prominence of karma in their life, they're called karma yogis. So karma yogis are also devotees. It's just that the material part of their life that they're fleshing out as an offering to Krishna is more prominent in comparison to the devotional part of their life, where they're directly hearing and chanting about Krishna. Karma yogis hear and chant about Krishna too, but in a more limited way. And they think that their duties are more important for them to perform than their devotional service. But when you say a bhakti yogi, we are bhakti yogis. So we also engage in the material world in such a way that we want to make it fit for offering to Krishna, whether we're working, raising a family, or whatever we're doing. But for us, our intention, our faith, and our orientation is much more towards hearing and chanting about Krishna. And we see our day-to-day activities as being subsidiary to or supportive of our devotional service. That's what makes us bhakti yogis rather than karma yogis. In Vedic culture, people do not have a very great understanding of the importance of devotional service. And so therefore, the general training was to focus more on prescribed duties. And so therefore, the majority of people in Vedic culture were called karma yogis. The principles of this chapter apply to devotees, that applies to people who are, generally focused on their duties. The principles, while they're similar, the orientation is slightly different. That's the distinction between devotees and traditional transcendentalists who engage in this practice. Now, the question that you have to, by the way, before we go on, does anybody have any questions so far? Or everybody's clear on what we've discussed?
Prabhu, just a question on perspective, like looking forward into the third chapter, there are many occasions that Prabhupada will translate karma yoga into Krishna consciousness and devotional service.
Yes.
But should we, in one sense, recognize as that being applicable to both ends and see how it can apply to the karma yogi and then also the bhakti yogi, but place more of an importance on the latter?
I'll answer this in a slightly different way. What this chapter teaches us to do is to become responsible people. When we are dealing with this world, there are certain principles with which we need to deal with this world. And there's a verse, you may have heard of this, what that verse says is somebody who's completely surrendered to the Lord is absolved of every other responsibility. I'll flip this verse around for you. If somebody is not fully surrendered to the Lord, what is his responsibility then? Well, he's responsible in some way or the other to the devas, the demigods, to the rishis, the sages, to bhutas, other living entities, to his ancestors, and like people who have made his life possible because of our ancestors, because of we have libraries, we have roads, so we are indebted to the people who have helped them, who've helped us in providing those attributes. So what karma yoga says is, unless and until you're fully surrendered to the Lord, or to the extent that you are not fully surrendered to the Lord, one has to lead a responsible life in this world. And you will see Srila Prabhupada, because most people coming to Krishna consciousness, they take their responsibility somewhat seriously. So what Srila Prabhupada is emphasizing in this chapter is how that responsibility can now be connected to Krishna. That is what you will see is the emphasis of Srila Prabhupada's purports. He will say, and here's a famous verse, if you open 330, let me know when everybody has opened Bhagavad-gītā 330. So it's page 167 in my book. Here's Prabhupada's purport. This verse clearly indicates the purpose of the Bhagavad-gītā. The Lord instructs that one has to be fully Krishna conscious to discharge duties as if in military discipline. So just imagine, somebody is so responsible, so on point in doing what they have to do. And unless and until they because most people are not able to perform their duties in military discipline because they need some kind of pleasure for themselves. So they take a break, they go to something else. But how is it that somebody can, in a regimented way, just do what they have to do in this world? That's only possible if they're taking happiness and pleasure in Krishna consciousness. So what Prabhupada is saying is you have to be fully satisfied in Krishna consciousness to turn to this world and engage in a responsible and in a military type way to engage in your duties. And then he says, such an injunction may make things a little difficult. Nevertheless, duties must be carried out with dependence on Krishna, because that is the constitutional position of the living entity. And then Srila Prabhupada continues, Arjuna was therefore ordered by Sri Krishna to fight as if the Lord were his military commander. One has to sacrifice everything for the goodwill of the Lord, and at the same time, discharge prescribed duties without claiming proprietorship. Arjuna did not have to consider the order of the Lord, he only had to execute his order. And Srila Prabhupada continues, he says, the Supreme Lord is the soul of all souls. Therefore, one who depends solely and wholly on the Supreme Lord without personal consideration, or in other words, one who's fully Krishna conscious, is called Adhyatma Chetas. Nirashi means one has to act on the order of the master, but not expect for the results. The cashier may count millions of dollars for his employer, but he does not claim a cent for himself. Similarly, one has to realize that nothing in the world belongs to any individual person, but that everything belongs to the Supreme Lord. That is the real purport of Mai unto me. And when one acts in such Krishna consciousness, certainly he does not claim proprietorship over anything. This consciousness is called nirmama, or nothing is mine. And if there is any reluctance to execute such a stern order, which is without consideration of so-called kinsmen in the bodily relationship, that reluctance should be thrown off. In this way, one may become vigatajvara, or without feverish mentality or lethargy. Everyone, according to his quality and position, has a particular type of work to discharge, and all such duties may be discharged in Krishna consciousness as described above. That will lead one to the path of liberation. Does that answer your question, Nandan Prabhu? So the point is that one has to be very responsible, but see everything as being belonging to Krishna. That's the application Prabhupada is emphasizing. Here in his purport, Srila Prabhupada emphasizes that relationship with Krishna. The original context of the chapter, it speaks about that relationship with Krishna, but it also speaks about the need to be responsible. And that's, you will see, as a fundamental focus of this particular chapter. Now, this chapter is broken into 4 natural sections. The first are verses 1 through to 9. Here, Krishna generally emphasizes, I'll first tell you the divisions. So the first section is verses 1 through to 9. And these verses describe in a general way the need for prescribed duties. The second section are verses 10 through to 16. Here, the section emphasizes the origin, the purpose, and the purity of prescribed duties. Because Arjuna has used this word, ghore, is ghastly. And Krishna wants to tell Arjuna that conception is wrong. These duties are spoken by the Supreme Lord, by me. So I am personally present in all of these activities. I'm the one who's given them to you. There's no question of it being, dirty or wrong, provided it's conducted in the right spirit with the proper intention. That's the second section, verses 10 through to 16. And in some sense, these verses 10 through to 16 are the heart of this chapter. Verses 17 through to 35, it describes when duties can be given up. So it describes, if you'd like, the scope of karma yoga. And it instructs individuals who are even ready to give up those duties, please continue to perform these duties, even as an example to others. Help others come up to this platform of purification of heart by performing prescribed duties. And then the last section is verses 30 to 35. This describes the fundamental obstacle to becoming fixed and responsible in prescribed duties. So, for example, as an example to illustrate the idea behind verses 30 to 35, imagine, we have to get up, we want to brush our teeth, we want to go to work. We wake up in the morning, we're like, I can't be bothered going to work. It's just, it's a Monday morning. I just want another day for my weekend. That's an obstacle because it stops us from, and how many of us have just woken up in the morning and the first thing we do is we just take a phone and we start playing with the phone. We start looking at WhatsApp messages, any Facebook messages, we look at, newspaper articles, or we just kind of lie in bed. How many of us have seen or have experienced that we or others might lie in bed for 2 to 3 hours after waking up, just looking at this, looking at that, watching videos, reading something? So Arjuna asks the question, what is the main obstacle? Why is it that even an intelligent person who knows he's supposed to be doing something else is forced into doing, wasting his time or engaging in destructive habits at the cost of his own consciousness and life? And Krishna says it is lust only, Arjuna, which is transformed into anger, the old devouring enemy of the spirit soul. This is the principal enemy of the transcendental practitioner. And he has to overcome this obstacle of lust and anger in order to remain fixed in his prescribed duties and to become elevated in spiritual life. So therefore, can we outsource our rounds? Varun Prabhu, can you explain that question? Or is that like a running joke? Not seriously. Okay, sorry. Fair enough. So the principal crux and the thrust of the third chapter is to say, Arjuna, you're thinking of just kind of running away from life and being spiritual. That's true, that's possible for a certain type of person, but you can't do that. Actually, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur describes it this way. Arjuna says, Krishna, I'm your devotee. Can't I just, go and chant my rounds? And Krishna says, well, I don't think you can just sit in the temple and chant rounds all day. And Arjuna says, well, can't I then just kind of, do some kind of meditation and focus on my spiritual life internally and just awaken this understanding that I'm a spirit soul as you've told me? Krishna says, I don't think you can do that either. Because the moment you hear something has gone wrong on the battlefield, you'll come running with your bow. Your son dies, you will go crazy and you will come onto the battlefield, you'll wipe everybody out. And Krishna actually makes that point in the first 9 verses. And Arjuna says, so what do you want me to do? I want you to do your duty. Although doing your duty externally and doing your duty internally are both equal, still, it is very natural that you would engage in your prescribed duties outside to first purify your heart. And then when your inclination to act in this world reduces because you have acquired a taste for the spirit soul, then you can engage in activities internally. Now, I don't know how to do this, but if we had a whiteboard, I would actually draw this in some way. I don't know if I can, let's see if I can do this in a, so imagine you have a line like this. Here's the fellow who has just come to spiritual life and he has started learning about the spirit soul. Here's the point where he has acquired a taste. At this point when he has acquired, some inclination for spiritual life, he still wants to go, he still wants to be a doctor. He still wants to go outside and do stuff. And at that point, he's not qualified to just do the internal work. He has to engage in the external activities for the purpose of inner purification. So at this stage, the focus is, and write this down, it is inner purification, and I can only write this as acronyms because I can't sketch. Inner purification for acquiring a taste for the Atma. You have to acquire that taste for spiritual life. When that taste becomes strong enough, then you can engage in direct practices to completely awaken that realization that you're a spirit soul. And those direct practices are called Gyana Yoga or Ashtanga Yoga. But this part is called Karma Yoga. And everybody has to engage in Karma Yoga before they go to Gyana or Ashtanga Yoga. Otherwise, they're not ready. The moment they try and jump here, their inclinations to act in this world, they haven't given up the desire to be a doctor. They haven't given up the desire to get married. They haven't given up the desire to do things in this world. So Krishna is saying, don't be a hypocrite. You're saying that you can't just give it up. Now, those who can give it up and struggle like brahmacharis do, that's wonderful. But those who can't, don't beat yourself up and don't be a hypocrite, saying that I want to jump here and be spiritual. Don't think that this is material. The Karma Yoga part is material. Engage in your prescribed duties in the proper way and become spiritual that way. It's the same thing Krishna says as Jnana Yoga. And this point will be mentioned in the 5th chapter. The fifth chapter, so the third chapter is called Karma Yoga. The fifth chapter is proper translated as being Karma Yoga and Krishna consciousness. Actually, the fifth chapter in Sanskrit is called Karma Sannyasa Yoga. What Krishna wants to emphasize there is karma equals sannyasa. Don't forget that, Arjuna. To emphasize that point, the fifth chapter is spoken. So this point that karma yoga will get you the same result up to a certain point as these direct practices is the point that Krishna wants to make. He's starting that in the third chapter by saying karma yoga is not impure. There's a reason you have to do it. It is pure if engaged in the appropriate way. It will purify your heart, and it will get you to this platform where you have a taste for the Atma. Then you can go to direct practices, giving up karma yoga, and awaken full spiritual realization. The point where Krishna speaks about giving up prescribed duties comes in the sixth chapter. So if you open the sixth chapter, Krishna, if you open 6.3, Krishna makes this point. He says, Aru rukshor muner yogam karma karanam uchyate, yoga rudhasya tasyeva samaha karanam uchyate. For one who's a neophyte in the eightfold yoga system, work is said to be the means. And for one who's already elevated in yoga, cessation of all material activities is said to be the means. The idea is, think about this time frame that we've shown here. What Krishna said, and I don't know if I can change, how do I change this? I need blue. What Krishna is saying is, you've started your spiritual life, you're a neophyte. So you need to perform prescribed duties with your intelligence fixed inside. Then you will purify your heart, you will awaken a taste for the spirit soul. Once you acquire a taste for the spirit soul, just don't give it up. Don't avoid performing your duties. Continue to perform your duties until your duties become an obstacle. When they become an obstacle to your advancing in spiritual life, then you can give it up and engage in direct practices. This part is the sixth chapter of the Bhagavad-gītā. Krishna does not speak about giving up prescribed duties until the sixth chapter. But from 3 to 5, he's speaking about this section here. The fifth chapter speaks about this part. Once you've acquired a taste for spiritual life. 3 and 4 speak about this part here. Why you should perform your prescribed duties, how you awaken transcendental knowledge by performing those prescribed duties. Chapter 3 speaks about the need for prescribed duties. Chapter 4 is called Gyana Yoga. Actually, it is transcendental knowledge, but it doesn't speak about Gyana Yoga. What it says is, by performing Karma Yoga properly, with a desire for purification, you will awaken transcendental knowledge. You will acquire a taste for the Atma. And then once you acquire that taste, you can continue to perform your prescribed duties as an example for others, not for personal purification. But at some point, it's going to become an obstacle. And at that point, you give it up and engage directly in certain practices to awaken your spirit soul. Now, what we conveyed was a lot of information. Does anybody have any questions or clarifications they want to ask?
Prabhu, it's me again.
Yes.
I have two questions. I'll put the kind of easy one first. Is with the taste of the Atma, what's the term that's used to describe that?
If you open chapter 3, text number 17. So this is the verse that describes taste for the Atma. Yastva Atma ratir evasyad Atma triptascha manava Atman eva cha santushtas tasya karyam na vidyate. But for one who takes pleasure in the self, whose human life is one of self-realization, who is satisfied in the self alone, fully satiated, for him there is no duty. He is no longer obliged to perform duty. But then Krishna says, kings, in text 20, he says, kings such as Janaka attain perfection solely by performance of prescribed duties. Therefore, just for the sake of educating people in general, you should perform your work. So to answer your question, text 17, 18 describe that state of taste for Atma. In fact, you know the Sita Pragya section that you covered in the second chapter? So Arjuna asks the question, how does this person, like, what are his qualities? How does he sit? How does he talk? How does he move? How does he move covers that point also. I mean, the Sita Pragya is somebody who has a taste for the Atma. And he's able to function in this world without personal desire, personal need. He is still performing prescribed duties at that stage, but more as service to others, rather than for personal purification. Does that answer your question, Nandan Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you.
And so that also, that explains the third section, when prescribed duties, what is the scope of prescribed duties? Scope of prescribed duties is to purify the heart. Once it's purified your heart, then it's served its purpose. You've acquired a taste for Atma. If you want to, you can go on to direct practices. But Krishna will say, stay with prescribed duties a while longer. It's the safer path, and it gives you the same result. That's the 5th chapter. Then the 6th chapter, he says, when it becomes an obstacle, give it up. Were there any other questions? No? What all I said was digested? Would someone like to repeat to me, like what we just discussed so far? I don't know, can I clear what's on the screen? Anybody still need this diagram on screen? Okay.
Sorry, I just have a question.
Rohan Prabhu, Hare Krishna. Yes.
Hare Krishna. You said that chapter 6 is when you disregard the duties, which are obstacles.
Yes.
Does that relate to nishkarma? Like, what does it mean exactly to disregard the duties?
Okay, it's like this. To disregard duties at that point means like, if that transcendentalist at that time has a deep need to completely awaken their spiritual nature, to throw off any connection they have with matter and to awaken their spiritual realization. Now for that practitioner, the specific process being recommended is 100% absorption in the form of the Lord as Paramatma. For that person, if he has to, take care of children or take care of a kingdom or take care of outside responsibilities, those duties, they take away his attention, which he's trying to, 100% fix on the Lord. At that elevated stage, the person meditates very, very intensely on, the toenails of the Lord, on the feet of the Lord, on the thighs, the waist, the neck. If there's a chakra, the Lord's chakra, it has 1,000 spokes. He meditates on each of the 1,000 spokes of the chakra of the Lord. That is approaching samadhi for this transcendentalist. And at that point, for him to kind of do his what we consider day-to-day routine, it's a problem because it just takes away too much of his attention and time. It prevents him from achieving perfection. So at that point, Krishna says, you just give up your home, go to the forest and meditate on my form. That's Krishna's instruction. But until you're ready for such meditation, stay at home and purify your heart, help others and get purified that way. That's Krishna's instruction.
That's great. Thank you, Prabhu. But I'm just wondering, in like a modern context,
Yes.
how would this be possible?
Very, very good question. The parallel is this. Does everybody know the 9 stages of bhakti? Yeah. So the first stage is what?
Shraddha.
Shraddha. Excellent. And the stage of being fixed is what?
Nishtha.
Nishtha. From Shraddha to Nishtha, your material identity is purified, and you awaken your spiritual identity as a servant of Krishna. From Nishtha through to Bhava, one is cultivating one's inner spiritual identity, but one does not give up one's services. But at the stage of Bhava Bhakti, typically, the devotee wants to completely awaken his or her relationship with Krishna. And so devotees at this stage, they will go and they will take almost like Babaji Vesha. They will go into seclusion, they will chant Hare Krishna continuously. And for them, not only their material duties, but sometimes even like their services, they need to now focus on the internal part of their spiritual life. So you will find them exclusively chanting and hearing about Krishna in complete isolation from the general mass of the devotees. It's when they're destroying their material body and awakening their spiritual life. Then once they attain prema bhakti, they will engage in their eternal services to the Lord. Or for the sake of the public, you will find that like Srila Prabhupada did, they will appear as if they're at this level. Sometimes you may have heard Uttamadhikaris appear as if they're practicing like Madhyamadhikaris, just for the sake of preaching. But in devotional service, this is where you will see it, above bhava and above, where you will see that engaging in your regular services can sometimes be a little bit of a hindrance. So you need that exclusive shelter in the Lord.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Does that answer your question?
It does. It's just a very like foreign concept to me, I guess. Like the idea of like being in seclusion, and it seems very against what like ISKCON is, like taking association of other devotees.
No, it's not against ISKCON because most of us are not on that level. But there are devotees in ISKCON who have done this, by the way. You will find that as you become more and more mature in spiritual life, devotees take more and more time off to focus on the internal life. Like if you look at His Holiness Devamrita Swami, I don't know if you know, but during Kartik each year, many of the senior Vaishnavas, they take a break from touring. I'm talking about Sachinandan Swami, Devamrita Swami, His Grace Purujan Prabhu, and they will sit and they will just chant more rounds. They will come together as God brothers and read. Their exclusive focus is their spiritual life. And you will find that as they get older or more mature in devotional service, even the times like they're on flights a lot of the time, they will use that time to really deeply go into their chanting. When Sachinandan Maharaj, for example, had a health problem, he was recovering somewhere in the Alps. He was told to take rest for 6 months or something. And those 6 months, he focused on his chanting. Every day he was chanting like 108 rounds or more. And he was just chanting every day for 6 months. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, towards the end of his pastimes, he took Babaji Vesha. And Srila Prabhupada actually in one conversation, he says, so throughout your whole life you can preach. And then towards the end, you can go to Vrindavan into seclusion and you can just chant Hare Krishna. You may have heard Prabhupada say this, by the way. So it's not that it is unknown to ISKCON. It is just that for the regular mass of devotees, we are not even at Nishtha. We are somewhere, if we are not initiated or we have not taken shelter of a spiritual master, we are less than Bhajana Kriya. If we are initiated and we are seriously following the spiritual master, we are somewhere here. Madhyam Adhikaris at the level of Nishtha. So therefore, the most of our preaching, most of our teaching is in this space here. We don't even speak about this realm here, which is Raganuga Sadhana Bhakti, which you will study with Toshin Krishna Prabhu in the Nectar of Devotion. So forget this part. We don't even speak about this part here. But if you read books by Bhaktivinoda Thakur like Bhajan Rahasya, if you read Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu or the Nectar of Devotion, you will see these elements present. The best reference that I can give you is, have you heard of the book Shuddha Bhakti Chintamani? So this is by Shivaram Swami. Read section 5 of this book. It's got 3 chapters. Shivaram Swami there describes the path of elevation for an ISKCON devotee from Shraddha to Prema. It's a fictional narration based on actual incidents. It's about a brahmachari called Achyutananda, how he enters the temple as a brahmachari and the struggles he faces, how he enters the stage of Bhava Bhakti, what he does there, and how he achieves Prema. Shuddha Bhakti Chintamani, those last 3 chapters will give you that full story or that full picture. And I highly, those who have not read Shuddha Bhakti Chintamani, read it. It's by far the most comprehensive book on devotional practices that you will read. And the last 3 chapters give a very good sense of the entire journey of a devotee's life. In the first batch of Bhakti-śāstrī, which we had conducted, we gave those last 3 chapters to the devotees as mandatory reading for the Nectar of Devotion studies. We had an open book question on those last 3 chapters.
Thank you so much, Prabhu.
It's okay. Did anybody else have any questions? Yes? No? Okay. So now I want to describe, actually, we were about to do this. Would someone like to tell me what is it that we have discussed so far? Just give me dot points. What have we discussed? Just throw them at me. The order doesn't matter.
Karma yoga is about taking responsibility for your life and practicing spirituality in a disciplined manner.
Partly, but we said karma yoga is about taking responsibility for one's material life in such a way that it becomes fit for offering to Krishna. Thank you. Any other points?
The difference between karma yoga and bhakti yoga is that the focus of the karma yogis is on the actual activity or the prescribed duties, where and not so much on the offering of the results of those actions to Krishna. Whereas for a bhakti yogi, the prominence is the intention in which they perform those activities is to offer to Krishna. So it changes the entire nature of the practice itself.
It changes the balance. It changes the difference between karma yoga and bhakti yoga is in the prominence and faith given to hearing and chanting about the Lord and one's relationship with the Lord. Karma yoga focuses on prescribed duties with offering to the Lord. The yoga focuses on hearing and chanting with material duties seen as a supportive element. They don't have faith that material duties are necessary for their purification because they know that bhakti yoga is sufficient. They engage in material life until they can engage in full time, until they have the taste for full-time devotional service. Thank you. Any other points? Can I start calling on people at random? Those have not yet spoken. So, Rani Mataji, any points that that you noted from our discussion?
The points have already been mentioned, Prabhuji.
Okay.
Also, the stages of, there was 9 stages of, can't remember the word actually.
Of Bhakti.
Bhakti over here. Bhakti,
Yeah.
9 stages of.
So what was the point that you drew from that?
There was a Nishkama.
So the word Nishkama is not part of the 9 stages of Bhakti. You have Nishkama karma is part of a gradual process of purification. Has this term been mentioned, this gradual process of the yoga ladder? So
Yes.
it's part of the yoga ladder. So Nishkama karma yoga leads to Gyana / Ashtanga yoga. But the 9 stages of Bhakti is part of pure devotional service. So those two things are not connected. I mean, Nishkama karma yogis will engage in hearing and chanting about Krishna. They will engage in the 9 processes of Bhakti. That was the point mentioned here. But their focus is on prescribed duties, whereas in devotional service, their focus is on Bhakti itself.
Yeah, it was a Shraddha Bhakti, I think was mentioned as well, the 9 stages.
Yeah, so Shraddha is the beginning.
Beginning, yeah.
And then it goes through Sadhu Sangha, Bhajana Kriya, Nartan Nirviti Nishta.
Then the Prema, being the ultimate.
Yeah, you're right. Thank you. Vignaraj Prabhu, any points that you remember or can recap? Vignaraj Prabhu, are you there? Okay, maybe not. And Bhumi Mataji?
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
So we also discussed how the verses for chapter 3 breakdown of the chapter. So from 1 to 9, Krishna emphasizes the need for prescribed duties.
Yes, 1 to 9. I can't scroll down. That's not good. Let's go here. Okay. So, yep, 1 to 9, need for prescribed duties.
Then 10 to 16, I think you said that Krishna describes the need for origin, purity,
Origin,
and purpose
purpose.
of those duties.
Origin, these 3 words, origin, purpose, and purity are prescribed duties.
Yeah.
Yep. And?
I don't know if I got the next one right, but did you say 17 to 35?
Yeah.
And then that emphasizes on duties that can be given up.
Is it 17 to 29 or 17 to 30?
So I'm not sure. I've said 17 to 35. Maybe it's not correct. Is it 17 to 30?
35 is the last section.
Right. Okay.
Correct
then
if
this
I'm
is
wrong.
7. Okay. So this would be 17 to 30 then.
Yeah. Okay. 17 to 30.
Yeah. So it emphasizes on when those duties can be given up.
When duties, the scope.
Yeah.
Of prescribed duties. And
also, yeah, and also it also instructs who are ready to give up those duties.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And also I think you said still perform prescribed duties to set an example to others.
Yep. Give it up, and the recommended practice for even those who are eligible to give it up. Okay, thank you. And 31 to 35.
I'm not sure, Prabhu. 31 to 35.
Main obstacle to becoming fixed in prescribed duties. Lust. How do you overcome this lust? That's the topic.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mataji. That is
Thank you, Prabhu.
Really good set of points. Sri Mataji, any points that you would like to share?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Yes, we are also like looking at Arjuna's assumption of how, like, you know, when you're doing work, like it's not spiritual, and this is like a common like misconception that people have about like spirituality. Oh, I don't know, I just give up everything. But looking back to like the purpose of prescribed duties, you need to do them to purify yourself internally.
Yes.
And then we looked at the stages, like when you start spiritual life, and then when you have like a taste for it, you still need to continue, but then you might come to the level to like adopt like the direct practices to just focus internally.
So Arjuna's misconception was that somehow internal cultivation of spiritual life is superior to engaging in the world for internal purification. And there is a hint in his question to suggest that he felt external duties may be impure. And yes, Krishna addresses. Can I delete this text? Is that okay? Is that cool with everyone? Okay. So clear everything. And okay. And the second point you mentioned was, so once we spoke about that, we spoke about, what is your next point, Sri Mataji?
The stages that we looked at, like when you go on that.
So karma yoga is for purification of heart. It is not true to say karma yoga is meant for spiritual realization. It is meant to prepare the heart for spiritual realization. That's what it means to say purification of heart. Karma yoga is meant to prepare for spiritual realization by purifying the heart. Purifying the heart of material inclinations. So the idea is that I work as a doctor in such a way that after 20, 30 years of such service, I don't need to be a doctor anymore. That part of my life has been satisfied. Does that make sense? If I'm a painter, I engage in painting in such a way that now I just want to hear and chant about Krishna. I'm okay with that. I engage with my children and family in such a way that after 25, 30 years of grihastha life, I'm very happy entering vanaprastha life. I'm not going to regret anything that happened in my material life. Now, this term, no regret, is used by everybody. The problem is, what do they mean by no regret? In this world, when they say no regret, what kind of things do they do to make sure they have no regrets?
Make sure you didn't miss out on things.
Make sure you take advantage of every experience.
People tend to adhere to their convictions and their own belief, self-belief, and their own philosophy of life.
Stick by what they believe or want to do. And anything else? A big part of it is to forgive yourself for anything that goes wrong. You know, I broke up with somebody, it's not you, it's me, and you know, we've got one life to live. We want to live with no regrets. I don't want to, you know, go 10 years in this relationship and have this be a disaster. So I don't want any regrets. It's the biggest piece of tosh that anyone will ever give you. Because the reality is that, you know, what does the Bhagavatam say about this kind of behavior? Does it say that people can be satisfied by just experiencing this world? The Bhagavatam says, Kamanalam madhulavai shamayandurape. It says that it's like pouring a drop of ghee in a blazing fire. The intensity of the fire may appear to just diminish slightly, but then it increases manyfold. So the idea of no regret actually is to experience material life in such a way in service to the Lord that you become more attached to the Lord than to the activity. So what happens then, and I'll write it out here because this is quite important, is this. Imagine one is, what's the, actually, I'll give you this example. My grandfather was a botany professor. So he had many PhD students. The PhD students would do their work, and of course they would need to offer it to my grandfather to make sure he was happy with it. So in this example, I'm comparing my grandfather in the analogy to Krishna, and I'm comparing the PhD students to the transcendentalists. So the PhD students, why would they have a relationship with my grandfather? To get a PhD. Otherwise, they didn't have a relationship. This is similar to having a relationship with Krishna through prescribed duties. But after the PhD, they became attached to my grandfather out of a sense of friendship. So it was no longer about the PhD. They were able to have that direct relationship with my grandfather. This is the stage when one can directly focus on spiritual life. This is similar to the stage. You can directly focus on spiritual life through Gyana Yoga or Ashtanga Yoga. Does that example make sense? With Bhakti Yoga, the difference is that they marry into the family. So my mother, she married my father. But even though she married my father because my father was from a homeopathic family, my mother was a homeopathic doctor, even though that part was there, what is predominant is the relationship. Here, what predominates is the relationship, rather than what you specifically want to share in the relationship. That's the difference between the gradual process here and the direct process of bhakti. The emphasis on the relationship rather than what you do in the relationship, or why you are in that relationship, what you want to exchange in that relationship. Excellent.
Can you repeat that again, Prabhuji?
What is prominent in devotional service is the relationship with the Lord, because anything you do in that relationship is satisfying. So devotional service, then, if my grandfather asked my mother to give up her practice for the sake of family, she would have done so. There's an element of surrender and compromise in a relationship. Whereas if my grandfather had suggested to these fellows that they give up the PhD, they would have given up the relationship. So what's important for a devotee is the relationship and the element of surrender in the relationship. For the karma yogi, they want prescribed duties, they want liberation. And that's why they go to the Lord. But as a result of engaging and offering things to the Lord, they become attached to the Lord in a slightly distant way. They can never be attached in the same way that family are, but there's a sense of respect and trust. And it is that attachment to the Lord, even however distant it may be, that allows them to overcome their need to be a PhD graduate or to be a doctor, etc. So it's prescribed duties is the reason for the relationship. And then when they acquire some taste, they can overcome the need for prescribed duties and leave material life with no regrets. This is the practice of karma yoga or nishkama karma yoga.
Prabhu, and I've heard, I think the marriage example is quite nice because I've heard Devamrita Swami describe the the big explosion stage at the start of a relationship that's not really regulated with someone else. You have the 14th month spell of being just caught by the desire, but then afterwards it kind of fades away because you haven't really followed the regulated practices in order to develop a sense of duty towards that person, a sense of performing your duties in bhakti. But if you were to just develop that, they say that the love and this connection between the two individuals is so strong that it cannot be broken even through the tough stages of life.
Yes.
So in one sense, it's the same with Krishna. If we perform those duties in a sense of just we do them sadhana bhakti, right? Like you were describing on the ladder between Shraddha and Nishta, if we perform that, then we will be Nishta fixed at that certain point and then be able to go further.
Yes, you're right.
It's a very nice example. Thank you.
So Prabhuji, in one of the lectures, Prabhupada also mentions that that in India, when they get married, right, children at a younger age they would get married, and at that time, he said that the girl does not have, doesn't know, the husband doesn't have bonding, but as the girl does the service, the wife does service to the husband, that's when she develops that love.
The point is that there's surrender that comes first.
Okay.
The girl surrenders in the relationship, and love follows surrender. Actually, this is the concept of the middle 6 chapters of the Bhagavad-gītā. Knowledge of Krishna, which produces surrender, which produces devotion. Those three things are connected. If you look at the Chaturshloki, it speaks about exactly the same train of thought.
Okay. Okay.
So knowledge, surrender, and devotion is the process of bhakti. In Nishkama Karma Yoga, the focus is the desire for liberation. That is the focus through the process of prescribed duties offered to the Lord. So the offering to the Lord comes as a means by which one can achieve perfection in one's process. Rather than the element of surrender is not as prominent.
Okay.
But the example of husband and wife is relevant, and the topic you brought up is really important because before the wife even fully understands what she's getting into, she surrenders to her husband in that example. It's not the case anymore. People know everything about everybody and they choose not to surrender.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So you're saying it's knowledge, then surrender, then devotion.
That's, yes, because anyway, that's the middle 6 chapters. I don't want to go too much into that, but yes, Krishna gives knowledge first. He says he says, Tat Shrunu, hear how you can develop love for me. Mai asaktam, this is 7.1. Mai asaktam anapartha yogam yunjan madashraya. With attachment to me, if you engage in the 9 processes of bhakti, understand how you can know me in full. And then he says, to develop this mood, he says, I'm going to give you 2 types of knowledge, Gyana and Vignana. That's a separate topic though. So Krishna gives knowledge, which leads to surrender.
Yeah.
Prabhu, I'm sorry to keep interrupting, but I just, it appears it might just be an obvious point, but it appears that, I mean, you had the line at the start, and you had the start of spiritual life, and you had karma yoga.
Yes.
And for that, there's the assumption that that person that before that didn't know anything, or at least is starting from the point of learning about Krishna, or learning about their spiritual life. That's it. Yeah. But for us, those examples of people who come into, ISKCON and Krishna conscious practice, we start from the point where we know Krishna, and so we perform activities. So it seems to be these two rivers are running in parallel. Prabhupada's focusing on the river that's directly to Krishna, and so it's a fast path. But there's still those people who are on the other path. There's a gradual process, and which would take. Is it just assumed that takes longer, but eventually the result is Krishna without a doubt?
Well, the question for you is that, does a PhD student ever become family?
Well, it depends about what they do after they finish university.
Well, they'll never become family until they marry into the family.
The marry.
So the marriage is compared to initiation. Until and unless one surrenders to a pure devotee of the Lord, one can never become of the family of the Lord. One can engage in all kinds of practices of karma yoga, Gyana yoga, Ashtanga yoga, but one will never become an associate of the Lord. One will at most attain liberation. You have to have bhakti yoga because Krishna is the controller of Maya. So without pleasing Krishna, Maya will never go away. Material duties can only be purified by association with the Lord, as much as stool is purified in association with the sun. So without the Lord, one is just in Maya. But it is because these fellows, they don't want a relationship with the Lord to begin with. They want, well, it's not that they don't want it, they want liberation. They want personal emancipation. And so because that's their focus, that's what Krishna gives them. But the devotees, they may want many things, but they surrender to the devotee of the Lord, and they transform their heart to want what the pure devotee wants. And for that, Krishna makes them part of his family. And he gives them a place next to him in the spiritual world. In the first 6 chapters, these practitioners never become associates of the Lord. They only will become associates of the Lord, even in perfection. They only become associates if somehow or the other they surrender to a devotee. To the extent they surrender, to that extent, there's a more personal relationship. So you will find in Baladeva Vidyabhushan's commentary, he speaks about a slightly higher degree of surrender than Vishwanath does. So therefore, Baladeva Vidyabhushan then says that the gradual practitioner understands Krishna's pastimes a little bit more and enters a somewhat distant relationship with the Lord. Like in, the 4 kinds of liberation above, impersonal liberation.
Yes, Sarupya.
He says that they enter Sarupya Mukti, which is a little bit closer than Sayujya. But they don't enter a relationship with the 4 rasas, which is Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, and Madhurya. Those 4 rasas are exclusively for the pure devotees. Nobody else touches them. Vishwanath explains this in the Bhagavad-gītā.
That's helpful. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you for the question. Any other questions? Has there been an information overload yet, or can we go on? Okay. Did anybody else have any other points they wanted to share? I think there are some devotees who have not spoken. I can't see their names. Like, how do I do this? Sorry, can't see the names. Mrinal and Shivam, Mrinal Mataji, Shivam Prabhu, were there any things that you remembered or you wanted to share?
In the 6th chapter, you also said that if your duties interfere with the spiritual life, you can disregard it.
Not you can. Krishna says at that point you should disregard it. So chapters 3, 4, 5, Krishna is only speaking about performing prescribed duties. But at the end of the 5th chapter, Krishna says, well, for somebody who actually needs to focus on the form of Paramatma, by the way, in the Bhagavad-gītā, Krishna tells Arjuna not to focus on Gyana yoga at all. He says Gyana yoga is too risky and it takes too long to master. So you engage in karma yoga when it becomes an obstacle, just go to Ashtanga yoga directly. He says skip Gyana yoga. That's his instruction.
Okay.
He says when you are eligible for Gyana yoga, Ashtanga yoga needs more purification than Gyana yoga, actually speaking. So he says rather than, and that's the 5th chapter, when rather than performing Gyana yoga, just perform Nishkama Karma yoga. It's the same thing. And you'll get the same result. And so then he says, perform your prescribed duties when you're purifying your heart, perform your prescribed duties to further awaken that sense of renunciation when you're preparing for Ashtanga yoga, and then just go directly to Ashtanga yoga. That's the flow from chapters 3 to 6. They're not really distinct chapters, it's one unified narration, one unified flow.
Okay,
and one concept. Mrinal Mataji, did you have any comments you want to share or add?
Prabhuji, actually all the points were like well discussed. Preferably going back to the basic point of the definition of karma yogis and bhakti yogis. The point that I liked was how you mentioned that for karma yogis, although they perform bhakti as well, they engage their senses more into like the material activities, so to say. And then bhakti yogis like ourselves, we perform bhakti more than the material activities. So that's the only basic point. Otherwise, everything was discussed fine. Hare Krishna.
Thank you for sharing that. I don't know if I missed out on anybody, but would anybody else like to share anything? Srinivasa Prabhu, anything you wanted to share, add?
So most of the points are discussed. Just would like to elaborate one point you mentioned, Prabhuji. It's like 9 stages of bhakti, like how it starts with the Shraddha and goes to the Nishtha, and from the Nishtha to Bhava and the Prema platform. So even the most of the sadhana devotees are coming between the Shraddha to Nishtha stage, whereas that is the point where the Madhyamadhikari is stating that stage, and then yes, and then even Uttamadhikari goes to the Bhava stage, sometimes comes back to the Nishtha stage to preach to the general public, and whereas they engages most of their senses in the Bhava stage, like in more devotional activities.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it's a way. I think that was discussed in relationship to Rohan for this question, just to give an illustration of a parallel process that we follow, or some principles that we can draw out from the gradual process and how we can relate to it by understanding what happens in the devotional process. Okay, so I now want to discuss something important. What is the, now we've said karma yoga. What is the difference between, so karma yoga, does this automatically mean that it is performed without material desire? I can see Nandan Prabhu shaking his head. What do others think?
Isn't the whole point that you do it because you have material desire? You just don't, you try to dissociate yourself from the fruit of the result.
We said karma yoga, and this is our definition. Karma yoga means to engage in prescribed duties in such a way that it becomes fit for offering to the Lord. This is our definition of karma yoga. Was there anything about material desire or anything here in this definition?
Can be called as a karma mishra bhakti as well, Prabhuji?
No. Karma mishra bhakti is mostly devotional service, with some elements of reliance on prescribed duties. That's different. Karma mishra bhakti is not spoken of in the first 6 chapters. That's much more elevated than what we're discussing now. So karma yoga it has no question of prescribed duties here. Another question, what do we mean by prescribed duties? Who has heard this term before? What does it mean? I mean, literally, it means that somebody is telling us to do something, right? Go clean your room. Go brush your teeth. Go to work.
Let's be Prabhupada's instructions. I think what comes in my mind is
That's not prescribed duties. We're talking about karma yoga. The spiritual master's instructions are pure devotional service. Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakti Sarma. That is the only, following the spiritual master's instructions is the only path of pure devotional service. That's not prescribed duties.
So would that be 5S model, the sadhana sabha?
No, that's again pure devotional service. That does not, because when we say karma yoga, it means, karma yoga means to engage in material activities, I should say. Material activities as prescribed duties in such a way that it becomes fit for offering to the Lord. So this is not hearing and chanting. This is not chanting of prescribed rounds. That's a misunderstanding.
Is it described like according to one's one ashrama, Prabhuji?
So let me be more specific. Let's just do it this way. So prescribed duties means duties one has to perform according to one's material position, traditionally known as varna and ashrama. What are examples of this?
Brahmana is engaged in studying the scriptures and preaching about the scriptures.
Yeah, okay, brahmanas, yes. So your profession, I guess what you're saying is profession, right? So would you say that as a doctor, one of your prescribed duties is to heal the sick? Would that be considered a prescribed duty?
Sorry, Prabhu, I couldn't get the question.
If you were a doctor, would healing the sick be considered your prescribed duty?
Mm-hmm.
That's a yes. Who says yes? Who says no?
What is the question?
If you were a doctor, is it your prescribed duty to heal the sick? Is that considered to be a prescribed duty according to the Vedas?
Yes.
Or prescribed duty means like some obscure varna and ashrama which does not apply now, and Vignaraj Prabhu says thumbs up. Please tell me. It's much more fun when people kind of shout things out.
Yes.
Yes, who said that?
Oh, it's me.
Oh, Vignaraj Prabhu? Jai. Anybody else?
I'm going to go out and say no.
No. Why? Why do you say no?
Because one's profession has nothing to do, I think, with the prescription of duties in the mature position of the living entity, which is described in the Bhagavad-gītā. And how I come to that is the fact that it's according to one's guna and which then decides their varna and ashrama, right? So you might say yes. I won't say yes as like a starting point, but it's a causative factor that proceeds from that basis. So I'm a grahastha in an ashrama where I have to earn money, right? And I have to support a family. And my prescribed duty is to support the family. I would agree. And if I'm a doctor in that position, if I don't heal a patient and I cause sickness to them and I don't do that, then I will lose that position and therefore will be unable to perform my prescribed duty to the family, which is a prescribed duty. So I would say it's more of a causative thing than from a basis. Yeah, healing as a doctor is a prescribed duty.
Okay. So was Arjuna being told to fight just to take care of his family, or he was being told to fight because it was the right thing for him to do?
Yeah, wasn't it his prescribed duty as a warrior to like?
Because I mean, it's his job as a Kshatriya to protect people. And he would be doing the wrong thing if he let Duryodhana rule the world. So the
Yeah.
right, I mean, think about the people Duryodhana would like harass and kill. The guy was so shameless that he raped a lady in public. Now, if that is example that the emperor of the world is setting, imagine what the citizens will do and want to get away with. The right thing for him to do was to remove that fellow. So it wasn't a question of family. Vignaraj Prabhu, what do you think? Why did you say yes, it is a prescribed duty?
Well, I was just thinking about like, we all have roles, like as a student, I should study, that's my prescribed duty. And I just thought every profession, that prescribed duty is what they do in that profession. So that was my line of thinking. So a doctor heals, so that would be his prescribed duty based on his role in society.
Excellent. So the answer actually is yes. Okay, another question. Brushing your teeth, if I can spell. Is this a prescribed duty? Or more generally, getting ready in the morning? Is this a prescribed duty? Sorry, Srinivasa, did you say yes? Thumbs up. The problem is I can't see everybody on screen. So just shout it out at me.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Yes? Okay.
No.
Who said no, Vignaraj Prabhu?
Yeah, I said
Okay.
no.
So why is it yes or why is it no? Srinivasa Prabhu, why is it yes?
Because that's the basic things we need to do, even to perform our prescribed duties. So if you don't do it that in a way, that means.
But in your explanation, you're saying that it is preparation for prescribed duties. You're
Yes.
not saying it's a prescribed duty.
Yes, Prabhuji.
So you're agreeing with Vignaraj Prabhu that it's not a prescribed duty. The implication being that the Vedas think it's like, it's not, I mean, why would you need to tell somebody to brush their teeth, right? People know that they need to brush their teeth in the morning, because every kid who ever gets up in the morning will just get up and brush their teeth as a default behavior. That's kind of the implication. Vignaraj Prabhu, why did you say no?
Well, I just thought it was like, it's not, and I just didn't think it was big enough to be a prescribed duty. And I kind of had this thought in my head, what if you don't have any teeth? But that's just a stupid thought. It's just kind of a joke.
Well, we've broadened it to say that it's getting ready in the morning. So even if you don't have teeth, you got to wash your mouth in some way.
Well, yeah, and what if you're like, you have the night shift, then you'd be getting ready at night. So it's very dependent. I don't think it's like
okay,
your duty.
In the morning,
Prabhuji,
when you get up.
I was thinking more towards.
Prabhuji, can we give this example? I'm not sure. Sorry, somebody was talking. You talk, Prabhuji. Nitai, Prabhuji.
No, go on,
That's
Mataji.
okay, Mataji, go first. You go first.
Yeah. So Prabhuji, how you had this prescribed duties and this? I imagine you're working for a company, right?
Yes.
And you have your duties you have to do, right? There.
Yes.
But they will not tell you have to wear iron clothes, you have to have shower and come to work. They don't tell all those things to us, no, Prabhuji, right?
They don't. But the question is not what the company tells you. What do the Vedas tell you?
Okay.
Isn't it just a default behavior of just being a human?
So what you're saying is basically
being?
it's not important enough to be classified as a prescribed duty.
Well, what I was thinking, Abhishek, Prabhu, is like stuff like brushing your teeth and like taking a shower, like getting ready. It's all like because it's like all like taking care of this body and just like maintaining and taking care of this body, and like we need to maintain and take care of this body to some extent in order for us to do our prescribed duties. So I guess in that sense it's still prescribed duty, but like I feel like we have a responsibility to take care of like our material body, like do some basic hygiene, shower, so that we can actually do other things. Because if we don't, then that's how it'll be wasting our human life. You know what I mean? If we just like don't maintain our do the minimum, not like overdoing it, like styling and like fashion, like not to that extent. I mean like basic stuff like a shower, and brushing your teeth. It's like something that as humans we need to do, otherwise it kind of differentiates us from animals otherwise.
Okay, good.
That's what I was thinking towards.
So how many say yes? We've heard Srinivasa Prabhu say no, Vignaraj Prabhu say no.
I said yes. I said yes.
Nitai Prabhu, Srinivasa Prabhu, you said yes. But then I think your explanation was aligning with Vignaraj Prabhu. Okay, anyway, you said yes. Nitai Prabhu said yes. Uma Mataji and Vignaraj Prabhu said no.
No, Prabhuji. Yeah. Sorry,
Okay.
yeah.
You're also saying no? Okay.
Yeah.
The answer is yes. If I can actually write it. Why can't I write it? The answer is actually yes. The Vedas tell you how to take bath. Like you have to wear a gamcha. They tell you how to brush your teeth. All of these things are considered prescribed duties. Now, what about offering food? Cooking every day. And making an offering. Is this a prescribed duty?
Well, this comes along the same line of thought as brushing your teeth. If you don't cook every day and eat, then you can't really take care of yourself, which is again.
So you're saying yes, right?
It's the same line of thought. I'm thinking, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Anybody else?
I'll say yes, probably again, this one.
Okay. The answer is yes. It is a mandate of the Vedas that one needs to make an offering to the Lord every day. It is considered devotional service, but in the context of karma yoga, everybody is told if you don't make an offering and you don't eat offered food, you're eating sin. And that point is made in the 3rd chapter of the Gita. It's considered a prescribed duty because most people don't do it naturally.
Aren't you even building a relationship with the Lord while you're offering?
So it is devotional service, but it is considered to be a part of karma yoga because devotional service is still, karma yoga means to do it in such a way that it's pleasing to the Lord. So therefore it's included in karma. Bhakti is there in karma yoga. It's just not very prominent, that's all.
Okay.
What about going for a walk? Is that a prescribed duty? I see Nandan shaking his head. Anybody else?
I think it depends on whether you're walking to maintain your body or at the expense of your responsibilities, right? Like if I'm supposed to be working, I just go for a walk instead.
I'm just going for a walk because I want to get a breath of fresh air.
I think that's fine, right? I think you can count that as prescribed duty.
Okay.
Well, actually, Kamya karma is not counted as prescribed duty, right? So actually,
it's not a prescribed duty because that's actually something for pleasure.
Yeah.
What about spending time with children? Like spending fun time with children? I'll actually give you 2 questions. Feeding children or spending time with children?
I think yes to both.
Yes. To both.
Yes.
I think the man has a license to have fun with his family, right? Yeah.
Well, in this case, actually, it's no. This is not considered a prescribed duty because that's something that you will do anyway. See, the purpose of, and here's the point I wanted to make. Prescribed duties are mandatory, mandates by the Vedas to bring people above the animalistic way of dealing with life. So for example, engaging with a spouse. So sex life with a spouse. This in and of itself is not a prescribed duty. But if it is said in the Vedas that if the wife comes to the husband for a child and the husband says no, that is sinful. So begetting a child, this is a prescribed duty. Begetting a child. Yeah, I'm sure people do that too. But begetting a child, this is a prescribed duty. But sex life is not. Because prescribed duties are mandates to bring people above the animalistic way of life. And that is the overarching definition that helps you understand what is a prescribed duty and what is not. When you wake up in the morning, animals don't brush their teeth. They just go and eat something. So when we get up in the morning, we open the fridge, we take a bottle of milk and we drink it directly, putting it in our mouth. That is considered an animalistic way of life and not a prescribed duty. But when we get up in the morning, we brush our teeth, we wear fresh clothes, we boil milk, we make an offering of that milk to the Lord. All of those things are considered to be prescribed duties because they regulate the life of the living entity. So here, can I clear all of this, by the way?
Yeah.
So here's the point I want to make. The Vedas mandate activities for every human being from the time they wake up to the time that they sleep, to bring the human to the human platform. Those activities which are mandated by the Vedas, they're called prescribed activities. Now, Srila Prabhupada, and how much time do we have? 2 minutes. Can I take you to, and Prabhupada explains this. Is it common for the class to finish dot on 12? Or do people go a little bit above?
We generally, at 12 o'clock, Darshan Krishna Prabhu says that I will end the class here, but I'll ask questions and whoever wants to drop can drop.
Okay. So the answer is yes. But if you can go to verse, okay. So if you can go to 247. Here Srila Prabhupada describes karma yoga. And this is what he says. There are three on page 115. He says, there are three considerations here: prescribed duties, capricious work, and inaction. Prescribed duties are activities enjoined in terms of one's acquired modes of material nature, so varna and ashrama. Capricious work means actions without the sanction of authority, so sinful activity. All of this is called karma, by the way. All of this is called karma. Because it's not karma yoga, it's karma. It's engaging in material activities. This is sinful activity. Inaction is not doing anything at all. And this is also a category of sinful activity. Also sinful activity. And inaction means not performing prescribed duties. Now then Srila Prabhupada explains, as far as prescribed duties are concerned, they can be fit into three subdivisions: routine work, emergency work, and desired activities. This is known as kamya karma in Sanskrit. This is known as naimitika karma. Routine work is known as nitya karma. I just want to make one clarification. I previously said that like spending fun time with children is not karma, like karma yoga. I'll clarify that in just a second. So here is the point. Routine work includes things you have to do every day, like your profession, waking up and cleaning yourself, cooking and offering to the Lord. Emergency work means the marriage ceremony. So this is occasional duties. So Prabhupada translates it as emergency work. It's also translated as occasional work.
One.
So marriage or getting the Gayatri, all of these are responsibilities that one has to undergo. What are the other samskars that are performed? like the Annaprashna, the first grain ceremony,
Garbhadana samskara.
Garbhadana, or the final death ceremony, Shraddha.
Offering pinda.
Yeah, that's Shraddha, offering pinda. All of these are considered to be occasional duties. So in Vedic civilization, karma yoga means to perform nitya. So karma means this. Who has heard these terms before? Dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. Who has heard these four terms before? These are the four purusharthas. So dharma means nitya, naimitika, and kamya. Those who typically, and kamya is like a subcategory. It's not really, it's considered to be a prescribed duty, but it's not in the main category. But when dharma is performed for artha and kama, this is known as sakama karma yoga. It is performed in line with the Vedas and for Krishna's pleasure, performed in such a way that it is fit for offering to Krishna, in line with the Vedas, and is performed so that it is fit for offering to Krishna, for artha, which is economic gain, or kama, which is personal desire. This is known as sakama karma yoga. Now, the majority of people in the Vedas would perform sakama karma yoga. Everybody performs karma yoga for personal benefit. So dharma for artha and kama is called sakama karma yoga. But dharma performed, and here you perform nitya naimitika, but dharma, which is you don't perform personal, like you don't perform things for personal desire. Nitya and naimitika, you fulfill your responsibilities daily and occasional. Performed in such a way that it is fit for offering to Krishna, but performed for moksha. This is called buddhi yoga or nishkama karma yoga. Does this make sense? Dharma means prescribed duties. It's broken into nitya, naimitika, and kamya. In the general life, people perform nitya and naimitika for artha and kama. But in nishkama, which is Krishna's recommendation, the same thing is performed, but for moksha. And it is performed for inner purification of heart. That's what it means. And it's called buddhi yoga or nishkama karma yoga. So Arjuna was already performing karma yoga as in sakama karma yoga. But when one becomes interested in spiritual life and understands the Atma, so that's why when we started this class, we looked at 239. And Krishna had said, Esha te bihita sanke buddhi yogatva imam shrinu. He said, oh Arjuna, what I'm telling you as the difference between body and soul, know that it is exactly the same as buddhi yoga. Because in buddhi yoga, you are not performing your duties for personal desire. You're performing your duties for inner purification of heart. You're performing it for moksha. So therefore, it is equal to Gyana. It is equal to Sankhya, which distinguishes body and soul together. And this is what you need to do for purification. Is everybody clear on this idea? Yes? Was this confusing? Was this okay? I hope that
good,
this...
Prabhuji.
Sorry?
It's really good. It's really good, Prabhuji.
Good. Now, this term, I want to clarify one last thing before we end. This term karma kanda, this term is often used. It is misunderstood. Karma kanda means specific rituals performed for material benefit. It can be performed by sakama karma yogis. It can be performed by nishkama karma yogis to teach others, not for personal desire, but to help others without desiring anything for oneself. Karma kanda, you leave it aside. Most people engage in regular prescribed duties, not occasional. Karma kanda means occasional rituals. But most people engage in their daily prescribed duties or occasional duties that they need to perform, but they do it in a way that it is fit for offering to Krishna, and it gives them economic benefit or sense gratification. That is what Vedas did. It's called pious sense gratification. We have impious sense gratification. We do whatever we want, whenever we want, however we want. But in the Vedas, you do what you're told to do. You do it in the right way to get something that you want. That is the Vedas for the majority of the people. But when they become interested in spiritual life, then they think, let me do what I'm being told to do. Let me cut out this kamya part, which is not necessary. Let me do what I'm told to do. Let me do what is necessary. Let me fill my responsibilities, as Prabhupada says, in military discipline, in such a way that it is fit for offering to Krishna. It purifies my heart. It gets me towards liberation. That is Nishkama Karma Yoga, and that is equal to Gyana. It is what prepares the heart for Gyana and Ashtanga Yoga, and it is what the transcendentalists in Vedic culture would do. And in the third chapter, Krishna begins to describe Karma Yoga generally. He's speaking about both Sakama Karma and Nishkama Karma. He says they're both okay because they both come from the Lord. But, oh Arjuna, you should focus on Nishkama. But it's not, in chapter 3, what Krishna is basically saying is don't think of Karma Yoga as being dirty. And he's explaining the purpose, the origin, and the purity of Karma Yoga in general. He's saying karma is not dirty, it comes from me. But then in chapter 4, he's saying, if you engage in karma yoga in the appropriate way, you will gain jnana. And so in chapter 4, the emphasis is engage in nishkama karma yoga, get jnana. In chapter 5, he says, nishkama karma yoga is equal to jnana. You don't need to perform jnana yoga. In chapter 6, he says, nishkama karma yoga, you engage in it only until the time that it is not an obstacle to finalize your spiritual life. Then you just give it up and you just meditate on my form and you achieve liberation. So I hope this has clarified Krishna's intention. We've spoken today about why Krishna is talking about the third chapter. From the discussion in the second chapter, we discussed Arjuna's confusion, why Krishna has initiated the third chapter, and where he's going in the third chapter, where he's going from the third chapter to the fourth, fifth, and sixth chapters. We've described what karma yoga is. We've described what nishkama karma yoga is. We've described the distinction between nishkama karma yoga and bhakti yoga. And I've gone over time. I sincerely apologize. But there was a lot of material to cover there. Okay, if anybody needs to drop out, please do so.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Thank you so much for filling in. It was so nice.
Bhagavad-gītā ki jai.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Okay.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. It is so nice
Hare
to
Krishna.
associate with all the Vaishnavas.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Dandavat pranam.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji,
Yes.
I had a question, Prabhuji.
Yes.
Prabhuji, how you mentioned about this nishkarma karma and all these things that you just explained, Prabhuji, how we can relate them to the three activities that in Bhagavad-gītā chapter 4, no, Prabhuji, they have karma, akarma, and vikarma. So how can we relate this, Prabhuji? Like how do we categorize?
Vikarma refers to what Prabhupada calls capricious work.
Yeah.
What were the other terms you wanted to clarify?
Karma, akarma, and vikarma. Vikarma means it's sinful, yeah.
So in that category, karma refers to prescribed duties performed for personal pleasure. Karma refers to prescribed duties performed for moksha. And vikarma refers to capricious work. Inaction is a part of vikarma.
Vikarma, okay. And what you told, no, Prabhuji, all this, nitya karma, naimita karma, where can we find more details, Prabhuji, on this for our understanding, and we can make some notes?
I think 247 is why Srila Prabhupada refers to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like
Otherwise,
in this way, Prabhuji. Okay, yeah. Otherwise, yes, Prabhuji.
Otherwise, you can just Google it. Maybe you'll find some references somewhere.
Okay, Prabhuji, no problem. Yeah. Okay, Prabhuji. Yeah.
Or you can just search through folio. Just type in. You can type in Veda base, like just type in, or in Vanipedia, you just search for like Nitya Karma, Naimitika Karma. You'll find it.
Yeah. Okay. Because this is very nice, Prabhuji. Very simple and easy to understand. I really like the way you categorized it. Actually, it's really easy down. Yeah. Yeah. Thank. And you'll come regularly, Prabhuji, or is just?
I'm just filling in occasionally. That's all.
Okay. Oh, Prabhuji is not well, Prabhuji.
No. Toshan Krishna Prabhu just had to take care of some exams.
Okay. No problem. Okay, Prabhuji. Yeah. Okay, Prabhuji. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Then, Dandavad Pranams, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Thanks, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.